Hello, my dear students. A warm greetings to every one of you. In this PPT session, we are going to have discussion about 53rd session of your syllabus. And in this session, we will have discussion about the last lesson that has been prescribed for you. That is The Child, written by, it is a short story written by Premchand. So Premchand is one of the most popular writers of Indian English literature. We will have more information about Premchand in our next slides. Dear students, before getting into the story, let us have a small recapitulation of the previous class. In our previous class, you were able to know the different punctuation marks. You came to know the usage of punctuation marks, and also you were able to read some paragraphs with the right usage of punctuations. And you have learned how to use the different punctuation marks and how to use them in your reading. And here in this slide you will have some learning objectives. It will help the students, that means for you people, to understand the short stories and their inherent themes. In the next slide you have some session outcomes. As I keep repeating you, you don't worry, don't have to worry about session outcomes and session objectives. And session outcomes will be, it will enlighten oneself with real meaning of modernity, and also it will help you to understand the influence of society on individual and his perception. Let's study what are all the contents we are going to discuss in this video session. The first content, that is about the author. You have come to know who is the author of this story, Premchand. We will have some more information about Premchand in the next slide itself. And also we will discuss about the introduction to the lesson. And also we'll come to know which are all the major characters of this story, and Gangu and his relationship with the narrator. So Gangu is one of the major characters, and we'll have information about his relationship with the narrator and the narrator's advice to Gangu. The story will be very interesting, and you'll come to know what narrator is going to advise to the protagonist of this story, Gangu. And also at last you will have the session summary, and you will have some multiple choice questions that you should answer yourself. And at last you will find the references where I have taken the source and other information to prepare this video. Let's start with the first content, that is about the author. As you all came to know that the author of this short story is Premchand. He was a great Hindi short story writer and a novelist. He is a famous Hindi short story writer, and also he wrote many novels in Hindi language, and his pen name was Dhanpat Rai Srivatsav. So he had a pen name that was Dhanpat Rai Srivatsav. He was born in a village near Varanasi, and his childhood and youth were marked by extreme poverty and domestic problems. By this reason, for this reason itself, that this lesson is also based on poverty and some domestic problems, because he also faced these kinds of problems in his childhood as well as in his youth days. He gave up, that word up is missing there. He gave up his government job in 1920 when Gandhi launched the non-cooperation movement and immersed himself in political and literacy writings instead. He was having a government job during 1920, but he was highly influenced by Gandhiji and his freedom struggle. So when the non-cooperation movement was started, he immersed himself in political and literacy writings. So if you had if you know about the non-cooperation movement, so it was started in the year 1920, and it was started by Mahatma Gandhi to uh, get the freedom to our country. So it was against the British administration and their rule. He has more than 300 short stories in Hindi and Urdu to his credit. He had written more than 300 short stories in both the languages, Hindi, and Urdu. So later on, his novels and other short stories were translated into in English by many other writers. Premchand was a true activist who dedicated his life towards progressive societal change. He was a true activist and he dedicated himself towards the progressive societal change. He married a child widow and showed that he was reformist even in his life and not just in his thoughts. So he married a widowed child, and he showed to the society that he was a reformist in even in his life, but not only in his thoughts. Let's see the introduction part of this story. This is the second content we are going to know. The Child is a wonderful story written by Premchand. The story highlights a new sense of social awareness in people. So it's a wonderful story, and in this story, you will have information and you will have a message of a sense of social awareness in people. The social awareness is very important for the people of this society, but the tragedies, we the people who are living in society, we are having lack of social awareness. The story is narrated by the employer who is generous. The whole story is going to be narrated by an employer and who was generous. What is the meaning of generous? Generous means he was kind hearted, and also he was expert in giving hand to others, helping others. The story reveals Gangu's compassion, courage, and acceptance of human nature. Gangu is a man, so having all these qualities, they are compassion, and he was courageous, and also acceptance of human nature. It shows the reader a way of casting aside the pressures that society exerts upon us. And what are all the major characters can be found in this story? Gangu is a major character, and he's the he can be called the protagonist of this story. And we find an unnamed narrator who is going to narrate the whole story. Is also an employer of Gangu. He has given a work because Gangu was working as a servant under the narrator. And another major character is that is Gomti Devi, and last and but not least the child. But not any name is not given to the child because the child is titled after the lesson, and no name is given to the child. The story. The next slide, we will see the story, the major highlights of the stories. The Child is a story which is narrated by the narrator who is generous and also rich. The narrator was not only generous, but he was also very rich because many people were working under him as servants, and Gangu was one of the servants. Gangu is one of the servants who serves his master. He is a Brahmin. So this is a very notable point. Usually, lower caste people will be working under a higher community people. But Brahmin, as a Brahmin, Gangu was working under the narrator as a servant. So this is this point to be noted here. The narrator believes that Gangu has the feeling of superiority and noticed by him because he was a Brahmin. That notion he had in his mind, that is what he used to feel superior than other servants who were working along with him. One day, and once, Gangu went to the narrator in private. The narrator thought that he must have come either to ask for money or to complain about another servant. Usually, he used to go for these two reasons: one, to ask for money, or he used to go to complain about the other servants who were working along with him. But for the narrator's astonishment, he did not come for both the reasons. He has gone to servant to talk in a private So what does he speak with the narrator? The narrator was surprised when Gangu declared that he wanted to leave the job. Narrator was really surprised. He was astonished because when he comes to know Gangu was leaving the job, Gangu was going to leave the job. That is what the narrator was very much surprised, and he wanted to know the reason why Gangu decided to leave the job. He gives the reason that he was going to marry Gomti Devi. We already came to know that Gomti Devi is another major character in the story, and Gangu is going to get married to Gomti Devi. So this was the reason given by Gangu to his master. But the master, the narrator, was already surprised that Gangu was going to leave the job. But for his another surprise, he tells the reason and gives the reason that he was going to marry Gomti Devi. Again, he was surprised. The narrator felt both annoyed and sympathetic towards Gangu. He did not know what reason makes him to get married Gomti Devi, because Gomti Devi is a woman who lives in the same village, had a very bad impression. She had a very bad name because she was a widow and she already married to so many men, and she was not able to live with any of them. She left many husbands, but Gangu decided, being a Brahmin, he decided to marry Gomti Devi. So that is what this annoyed narrator. The narrator's advice, when he hears that Gangu is going to marry Gomti Devi, so he wanted to give some advice to Gangu, but Gangu was not ready to listen to them. Let's see what advice he is going to give him. The narrator advises him not to marry Gomti Devi as her character was not good. So it was known in the whole village, all the people from the village knew that Gomti Devi had such a bad character. The narrator was sure that she would not stick with him for not more than a few days. He was very much sure if he marries Gomti Devi, she will never be with him more than a few days. ನರೇಟರ್ ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡೋದೇನು, ನೇನಾದರೂ ಗೊಮ್ಟಿ ದೇವಿನ ಮದುವೆ ಆದರೆ ಅವನು ಕೆಲವೇ ದಿನಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಸಫರ್ ಆಗ್ತಾನೆ, ಅವಳು ಅವನ ಜೊತೆ ಬದುಕಲ್ಲ. ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ಯಾಕೆ ಅಂತಂದರೆ ಆಲ್ರೆಡಿ ಗೊತ್ತಿತ್ತು, ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ಗೊತ್ತಿರೋಂಥ ವಿಷಯ ಆಗಿತ್ತು. ಅವಳು ಮದುವೆ ಆಗಿದ್ದಂಥವಳು, ವಿಡೋ ಆಗಿದ್ದಂಥವಳು, ಬೇರೆಯವ್ರ ಜೊತೆ ಬದುಕೋಕ್ಕಾಗದೇ ಇದ್ದಂಥವಳು. ಬಟ್ ಗಂಗು ಯಾಕೆ ಮದುವೆ ಆಗೋದಕ್ಕೆ ತೀರ್ಮಾನ ತಗೊಂಡಿದ್ದಾನೆ ಅಂತ ಆತರಿಗೂ ಕೂಡ ಆಶ್ಚರ್ಯ ಆಗಿರುತ್ತೆ. ಬಟ್ ಎನಿ ಅಡ್ವೈಸ್ ವಿಚ್ ವಾಸ್ ಗಿವನ್ ಬೈ ದ ನರೇಟರ್, it went in vain, because Gangu was not convinced by the narrator's advice and he did not want to leave Gomti Devi. Already decided to marry Gomti Devi. Session summary. Let's see so what we have seen in these slides, in the above slides. Premchand was an outstanding short story writer. We have come to know some more information about Premchand. The story Child reveals Gangu's compassion, courage and acceptance of human nature. Gangu was a Brahmin and worked as a servant under the narrator, and he decides to marry Gomti Devi. So this made the narrator very much surprised. The narrator felt annoyed and advised him not to marry her, but Gangu was not convinced by the words of the narrator. He was not ready to listen to anyone's words. From here you will have some multiple choice questions. Who is the author of this story, The Child? 4 options have been given. The first option is R.K. Narayan, option B is Premchand, option C is Oscar Wilde, and option D is Mulkraj Anand. So who is the author of this story? The author of the story is option B, that is Premchand. And Premchand wrote short stories in dash. He wrote in 2 languages. Option A Tamil and Telugu, option B Persian and English, option C Hindi and Urdu, option D, Hindi and Kannada. I hope you might have read in the previous slides, in the above slides. So the right option for this question is Hindi and Urdu. He wrote in these two languages. The protagonist of the story is ಈ ಕಥೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಬರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಕಥಾನಾಯಕ ಯಾರು? Option A B, option A Gangu, option B Gomti Devi, option C Ramu, and option D child. The right answer is Gangu. And here is your next question. What did the narrator advise Gangu? What was his advice to Gangu? Not to marry Gomti. Option B, to marry Gomti. Option C, not to have the child. Option D is not to leave his job. What was the advice given by the narrator to Gangu? Then option A is the right answer. He advised him not to marry Gomti Devi. So what was the reason? Because Gomti Devi was not such a good character of woman. Gangu was a dash. Option A Dalit, option B Muslim, option C Parsi, option D Brahmin. So who was Gangu? Gangu was a Brahmin. Yes. So by this we have completed the 53rd session of this lesson. This is the first session of this lesson, and here you find the references where I have taken some elements and sources, as usual, from the text Innovation Board of Editors approved by the Board of Studies in English, and also I have taken some information from the website www.brainly.com. Thank you so much, my dear students, for your patient listening. We'll have the continuation part of the story in the next PPT in the 54th session. Until then, have a good day, have a nice time. Thank you so much.